Okay, thank you, and hello everyone. We're very excited to be here in Dublin. I think Alex deserves huge props for pulling this off. We decided to do our talk on 8 tips, 8 do's and don'ts for SaaS startups. And I'm going to start with a small apology. Some of these might seem a little bit obvious to some of the audience, but we've tried to put a good range in there for everyone. Let's do the introductions. My name is Nick Franklin. I'm the founder, CEO of a company called ChartMogul. We help others, we're a SaaS software company, of course, and we help other SaaS businesses measure their KPIs and metrics and get insights from their data. Prior to ChartMogul, I spent 5 years at Zendesk as their head of European region and then Asia region. Christoph.
Hi, everybody. My name is Christoph Janz of Point 9 Capital. Point 9 is an early stage VC. We're based in Berlin, focused on SaaS. We've been lucky to invest in some great European SaaS companies, some of which are here today, like Algolia, Free Agent, Typeform, and of course ChartMogul. Many thanks to Alex for organizing this great, really awesome conference, and thanks for inviting us. I'm very excited to be here today. Yeah, I think we only have a few minutes per do or don't, so we better get started. You've probably seen this picture before. It's from the Black Tuesday in 1929, and it shows a man who offers his car for $100 because he lost everything in the stock market. That's a very sad story, but the good news is that you're not as desperate as this man, and therefore our first recommendation, our first tip is to not give away your product too cheaply. Giving away your SaaS product too cheaply is something which we've seen many, many times. In fact, it's probably a mistake which many, maybe even most SaaS founders make, especially those that are trying to sell to bigger customers. It's pretty easy to see why that happens. First, most startup founders have never worked in a large company, so it's very hard for somebody who's never spent more than a few $100 on any piece of software to imagine that companies really spend millions of dollars on software. Second reason is that you know all the shortcomings of your product better than anybody else. You know everything that sucks about your product. You know all the bugs. You know all the features that are on the roadmap but aren't done yet. And you probably feel like you can't ask for big dollars until your product is perfect, which it probably will never be. Third, you want customers. You want happy customers. You probably want to please your customers. You're trying to remove any friction from the conversion process. Maybe you want to avoid difficult conversations with your customers. Maybe you're a bad negotiator. Maybe you don't want to talk to your customers at all and just build a self-service business. That's all very understandable, but it's exactly these biases and pressures that make it very likely that you're currently underpricing. And I want to encourage you to try that, to try to increase your prices and to change that and increase your prices. Double your prices. Really, give it a try. You don't have a lot to lose, but if it works out, and I've seen many companies where it did work out, it can completely transform your business. So don't give away your product too cheaply.
Thanks, Christoph. And we recently raised our prices for new customers in June, and so far it's been definitely a good move. So yeah. Tip number 2 is don't assume that because you're growing at over 20% month on month in your first year of business, that you can do the same thing in your second year of business. Imagine you're a SaaS company. You know, after the first 12 months of selling your product, you go from $0 in MRR to maybe $50,000 in MRR. This is a good performance. It's quite common. And during that first year, there are some months, many months where you're growing at more than 20%. I remember when ChartMogul was at sort of 15,000 or 10,000 in MRR. There were some months where we grew at 50% month over month. It's absolutely amazing, you know, that you can have such high percentage growth rates, of course. But it's all, you know, you're starting at a very low base. So it's kind of tempting. You read SaaStock and these other VC blogs, and the number of 10% or more month over month is often kind of used as this kind of benchmark of, okay, every successful high-growth SaaS business must be growing at 10% month over month. And so it's tempting as a founder to think, well, we're growing at 25% month over month, so it's going to be easy to grow at 10% month over month next year. But percentage growth, it very quickly compounds. So at 50,000, growing at just 10% is an additional 5K in net new MRR. It's not so hard. 9 months later, that's $10,000 in net new MRR to keep growing at 10%. 13 months, it's $15,000 in net new MRR. 19 months is 25,000 net new. And it's just like very quickly compounds. And what was kind of a gentle stroll in your first year very quickly turns into this kind of vertical cliff. And to really achieve this kind of growth, either requires some sort of real virality, or you have to build up quite a considerable sales and marketing operation to kind of support this. To go from and even if you have the capital available to you and you deploy that capital in building out the necessary marketing and sales machine, it's still difficult to go from adding 5K in net new MRR to adding 15K in the space of 12 months, which is what is required to grow at just 10%. So the tip here is, instead of basing your forecasting on percentage growth rates, base it on net MRR increases, and this will help you think about what you need to do to achieve this, what churn rate you need to maintain, because obviously once you get to initial scale, churn starts to eat away at growth. How many salespeople will you need to hire, all these kind of things. And this will help with your forecasting and with your planning, and versus relying on just extrapolating percentage growth out into the future. And I, for one, made this rookie mistake at least once over the last couple of years. So.
Yeah. And I'm sorry, because I've seen this before, but apparently I didn't warn you, so sorry about that. Okay, number 3, don't reinvent the wheel. I remember that when I started my first internet company, which was about 20 years ago, which sounds insane and tells you something about how old I am, we had to build everything ourselves because nothing existed. There was no AWS, no Google Analytics, no Stripe, there was really nothing. And what's maybe more, there was also absolutely no information out there on how to build and run a web startup. Quora didn't exist yet, there were no blogs, even conferences like this one pretty much didn't exist. So we really had no clue, and there was nobody who we could ask, and that's why I picked this picture, because we probably looked like this poor boy at those times. Today, we're living in a completely different world. You have AWS for your infrastructure, you have Algolia for search, you have New Relic for application performance monitoring, you have Optimizely for A/B testing, you have Stripe for billing, and the list goes on and on. And by using all of these great tools, by leveraging all the work that others have already done, you can just move so much faster, and that's definitely something that you should do. Also, the playbooks of some of the most successful startups have been opened. Jason Lemkin alone has answered more than 2,000 questions on Quora, most of them on SaaS and startup-related topics. Between his answers and everything he publishes on SaaStock and the blogs of people like Hiten Shah and Tomasz Tungusz and many others, and of course conferences like this, you can find great answers on pretty much any question that you can imagine. So make sure you use that wealth of knowledge, like whether it's about pricing, content marketing, landing page optimization, sales team compensation. There is such a wealth of information out there which helps you learn about all the best practices. You should, of course, still try to innovate, try to build a better product, try to innovate on user experience, or try to find new growth hacks, but don't reinvent the fucking wheel. Or as Father Jack would say, don't reinvent the fucking wheel. I actually don't know that guy, but Nick told me that everybody in Ireland loves him, so I hope that was an appropriate joke.
I'm not sure. All right, number 4. Don't mistake latent demand for product market fit. When a new SaaS company first launches, they often get a kind of initial spike of sign-ups or activity. And this is usually due to sort of latent demand. There's often a kind of class of customer out there that may just be waiting for exactly what you've built. And often those customers, often similar to yourself, as founders often build SaaS products that they themselves would like to use. This initial spike can often be kind of short-lived, and the product often needs to kind of evolve quite considerably post that initial traction in order to be addressable to a wider market beyond those early adopters. And this is especially true in SaaS companies that kind of build their product on top of a pre-existing ecosystem. Be it you build your SaaS company on top of Slack, perhaps, or in our case, this was building on top of billing systems like Stripe and Braintree and Recurly and other systems like that. So we actually had to kind of evolve our product considerably post getting off to a really fast start in order that it could be addressable to a wider market and kind of preempt that before our growth plateaued and evolve the product. So yeah, my only learning from this is try and understand the market dynamics of your product and the market, and don't kind of jump the gun and invest too much into sales and marketing early on before you know that your product is truly ready to scale up in a large enough market. In a small addressable market, word of mouth is probably sufficient and will probably be very effective. So keep evolving the product until you're ready to scale up and invest in marketing and sales and marketing when your product is truly ready to scale up.
And there is a book related to that, which probably some of you have read, called Crossing the Chasm. If you haven't read it yet, highly recommend it.
And the segue, I think, was a good example of this, although you had more, I think you remember better than
one of the, I mean, I don't know if there was latent demand, but at least there was a huge amount of latent hype. I know that people hype that product so much, saying that whole cities will be transformed and life will never be the same. So I think by now we actually see a segue every now and then, but I guess it hasn't really transformed cities yet.
No. Yeah.
Okay. Number 5, don't screw up your fundraising. If you're the CEO of a company, of a startup, one of your most important jobs is to make sure that you have money in the bank. And if you like it or not. And unless you're bootstrapping or profitable, it means that you have to raise money probably multiple times. So it's important that you're getting really good at this. And there are lots of ways how you can screw up your fundraising. We could do an entire do's and don'ts talk about this. I could probably talk about this topic for hours, so I'll just pick a few of the many mistakes that I've seen many times firsthand. The first one is you should create a really, really awesome deck. I think founders sometimes underestimate the importance of that and just spend a little bit of time creating an okay deck, but I think you should really aspire to build a really, really great deck, and I think you should assume that it's a time well spent. It's your chance to leave a great first impression with investors, and I think you shouldn't miss that. It also forces you to carefully think through all aspects of your business, so it also is a good exercise to make sure that you become really clear about what you want to do and how you want to do it. Second, make sure that you talk to the right number of investors. You should obviously not blast out an email to hundreds of investors, ideally with everybody on CC. Yeah, that happens occasionally. That's not a great way of doing it. But it's equally bad if you talk to only 1 or 2 VCs because you think you're friends with them. Your goal should be that at the end of the process, you end up with 2 or 3 firms that are great, that you like, and that want to do the deal, so you can run a somewhat competitive process. And that probably means that you have to start with 10 or 15 investors in the beginning, maybe more. If you get a lot of rejections, you have to add more VCs or investors in general to the funnel. So consider it a process and a sales funnel in a way. And the third point on this, make sure you're really on top of your metrics. If you're looking at the wrong metrics, or if there are inconsistencies, or if you have trouble getting hold of your KPIs, that can be a huge turn-off. I mean, obviously, you should have an intrinsic interest in your KPIs anyway, but as it relates to fundraising, it's very important as well. If you can present investors with a comprehensive set of KPIs, that's a big plus. And also helps you preempt a lot of due diligence questions which you would otherwise get. And if you're a SaaS company, I think Nick has a pretty good tool to help you get all these metrics.
Thank you. Number 6, do everything you can to win the US market. In SaaS, it's really, you really want to be the category leader. At Zendesk, if you're the category leader, your sales and marketing efficiency is just way better. And at Zendesk, we were the category leader. Every single deal, every single decision to buy a new customer service software, Zendesk would be kind of one of the options on the table, and it just makes everybody's life easier if that's the case. And Salesforce is obviously the ultimate example of a category leader. Every decision to buy a new CRM within an organization will have Salesforce as one of the options being looked at by default. And the other CRMs that are being considered will probably have to spend a ton of money on marketing just to get onto the table at all. And you can also charge more if you're the category leader. So yeah, in other words, you really want to be the category king. And the US and Canada makes up about, I was really surprised researching for this, that this is the truth, but it makes up around 50% of the world's global software spending. And it also happens to have a single language, for the most part, English, which is also spoken in other large software markets like the UK, Australia, New Zealand, here in Ireland. So the English-speaking market is by far, it's the majority of the world's software spending. So, forgot my thread, but
go there yourself.
Yeah, so and this because of the size of the U.S. market, the company that wins in the U.S., by default wins globally in any kind of winner-takes-most market, and which is kind of like this is part of the reason why a lot of founders of successful SaaS startups end up going to the U.S., moving to the U.S. from Europe and other places, and often VCs sometimes recommend and occasionally require that founders go to the US when making an investment, just because you're just much more likely to be successful in a market if you go there yourself versus hiring a local executive who may not be as committed, and if a new sunnier opportunity comes along, might be more willing to might just switch to that. So it's often a good idea to go there yourself, and that's often what happens. And so my advice is just to do everything you possibly can to win in the US market, even if that means that you neglect your home market if you're not from North America, if you're from Europe, even if it means neglecting your home market, because in the long run, if you just focus on your home market and neglect the US, you'll lose eventually, because the one that wins in the US will just come and eat your lunch in your home market eventually. Maybe not always, but usually. So that's...
Number 7, don't end up in the SaaS graveyard of low LTV and high CACs. That probably requires some explanation, so let's take a look at this chart. What you can see here is a simple 2-axis chart with CACs, short for customer acquisition costs, on the x-axis, and LTV for lifetime value on the y-axis. If you have a high LTV and probably also high CACs, then you're going after bigger customers, you're going for enterprise customers. or as I like to call them, you're hunting elephants or maybe even whales. Some of the most successful large SaaS companies are in this corner: Workday, Viva, probably even Salesforce, since they also derive a majority of their sales from very large customers. If you look at the opposite corner, you have what I like to call rabbit hunters or mice hunters. These are companies like Squarespace or Typeform, which have a very low LTV, but also have a very, very low customer acquisition costs. Usually because there is some kind of referral loop or some kind of viral loop built into the product. And then there is the corner in the top left. Like the animals that you can chase there are very, very elusive. Very, very few companies manage to combine low customer acquisition costs with a high LTV. Maybe Slack is up there, maybe Dropbox, maybe Zendesk. But it's a very, very lonely place up there. So that only leaves us with the corner in the bottom right, which I like to call the death zone, where you basically have zombies hanging around. Unfortunately, this quadrant is filled with a lot of SaaS companies that didn't manage to align their CACs and their LTV with their LTV in a scalable way. And if you're in that corner, you really have to get out of there. There are obviously a few things that you can do. Either you can go up, which means you have to increase your prices, you have to add layers to your product, charge more, or maybe go after a different type of customer. Another option is to go left. That means you have to try to increase your CACs. If your product has some level of built-in viral potential, like some sort of inherent referral loop, you should be obsessed about maximizing that, because that can obviously be completely picture-changing. If there's no inherent referral loop attached to your product, you probably won't be able to add it artificially. But you can still try to decrease your customer acquisition costs by improving your product in general, by improving your onboarding experience, or by finding new distribution channels. So you have to either go up or go left, or do a combination of both things, or you will stay in the graveyard.
Number 8, the final point is don't blow your seed round on paid ads. Now, full disclosure, I doctored this image and stuck Yahoo's logo there, so it's not very fair. But you can imagine this may be a story of a tech startup with way too much money doing something like this at the Super Bowl. Instead, invest in engineering and just build a world-class product. In your first kind of couple of years running a SaaS business, you kind of want to create as much distance as possible with the other startup competitors in your category. And I think there's this temptation that when you close your first seed round, you have your first real round of funding, and you have $1 million in the bank, or maybe $2 million in the bank, to spend some of that money to acquire new customers and spend some of that money on paid ads to acquire new customers. But I think this is usually not the right decision in the early days. Paid advertising by definition does require some waste. You have to, in both time and money, you have to run different experiments to see what works and what doesn't. And those wasted paid clicks are not something that you get to keep once you've spent that money on them. And I think when you have very finite resources, everything that you spend money on, you want it to be something that you get to kind of keep. So I think instead you should just invest heavily in product development and try and build the best product in your category. And you probably don't have enough money anyway to really buy mindshare with paid advertising. But you probably do have enough money to build the very best product in your category. And that will bring you mindshare and authority through word of mouth by having the best product. And word of mouth is by far the best form of marketing anyway. So you want to just do everything you can to make that happen. So yeah, my advice is spend the vast majority of your seed round on engineering. And your product is still not mature. It needs that investment, and win by having the very best product. And as SaaS products are not the most visual of products, I've picked three hardware products which kind of show these world-leading products in their categories.
Good. Well, I think this was pretty fast. I think we actually have 3 minutes left, so we can probably take 1 or 2 questions if there are any.
But we can't see anything because it's like.
Yep. Yep.
What do we mean by high and low? Which is high, what is low?
The range is very broad. Like maybe if we talk about like ARPU for a second, like ACV and CAC is obviously then something which you can put in relation to that. I think in SaaS, the ACV is like average contract value per year for your customer base. I think it's usually between a few $100s, like when you charge just $20, $30 per month, up to really millions of dollars. I would say what I would consider like the whales are customers where you charge them like really like 7-figure amounts per year. Something which obviously not that many companies achieve, but charging 6-figure amounts for customers on a yearly basis is not that rare. And if you look at these amounts in terms of the ACV, and then because you asked about the customer acquisition costs, a good rule of thumb is probably that you should spend maybe round about 12 months of MRR on CACs. I mean, obviously you can go higher if you have a very long lifetime value, and maybe you should go lower depending on a bunch of factors. So it's just a very, very rough rule of thumb. One more?
Questions?
Otherwise, we're done.
Okay.
Thanks very much.
Thanks, everyone.